Колеги, ми розпочнемо за декілька хвилин, будь
Good
ласка.
afternoon, colleagues. We will start in a couple of minutes' time. We're still waiting for some of the participants to join us. Thank you.
of the project team and the Council of Europe Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. We are very happy to be together today and to see so many participants joining us online. It has been important for us to continue supporting Ukrainian local authorities, Ukrainian partners, working with the AUC in these difficult times. So today we are at the third meeting of the platform of National Local Dialogue on Open Government. Open government, which remains an important component of participatory and inclusive decision-making, has been a success story in Ukraine. And I would like to start by saying that we are very happy to see that many of the local authorities, despite the situation, are joining us today to tell us about the actions, the interventions that they are making in their respective territories. So we will speak today after the opening. We will speak on about the new action plan that Ukraine is preparing for 2023-2024. We will have feedback from a number of local authorities. Hopefully, they can still remain on board all throughout this meeting. And then, as a new element, we will discuss deliberative democracy as an innovation in approaching citizen participation, discuss the added value of such an approach that we Congress have been implementing in other projects in other countries, namely in Mostar and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I hope that you cities of and cities and local authorities from Ukraine will find it interesting and inspiring for future action. Without waiting longer, I would like also to greet everyone and greet in particular Rafael Benitez, Director of the Congress, who was with us already at the first meeting, if I recall well. Rafael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marite. Dear State Secretary, dear mayors, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Council of Europe, I have to say it's really a pleasure to join you as well in this third meeting. As some of you may recall, I was already with you at the launch of the platform on the 8th of April 21. And I'm glad that despite this very difficult situation that you are facing, this meeting can take place, and it will serve to further strengthen cooperation and increase communication and dialogue between central and local authorities on open government, accountability, and citizen participation in times of crisis and in view of the post-war recovery. I would like to reiterate, indeed, the Congress' solidarity and support with your country and its people in resisting this brutal war of aggression. As you know, the Congress has been doing this from the very beginning, from the outset, and it's done it with political statements and declarations, but also with practical tools. On numerous occasions, the Congress has reaffirmed its commitment to the independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity of your country within its internationally recognized borders, and we will continue doing so. The President did it recently at the World for Ukraine Summit. Along with the political support to Ukraine, we have also immediately taken steps, practical steps, to assist with building partnerships and networks in order to facilitate humanitarian aid and exchanges of know-how. And again, we will continue to do so. The well-known Cities for Cities platform and the Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction of Ukraine are but an example of our commitment to these goals. We have also continued our cooperation activities with the joint work with the Association of Ukrainian Cities, and we will continue to do so. The platform for national-local dialogue is a direct result of our common efforts, and more importantly, of the mutual trust between central government represented by the Cabinet of Ministers and local authorities represented by the Association Ukrainian cities. It is also approved that constructive dialogue on the implementation of Ukraine's open government commitments and the necessary legislation, policies, and practices bring along tangible results for the benefit of all, in particular for the Ukrainian citizens. So allow me at this point to praise local authorities in Ukraine and their most representative national association, the AUC, for being a bastion for upholding democratic values and promoting open government at a local level in times of war. Your commitment towards enhancing local self-government and embedding open government principles at the local level, especially in the last months, it's proven to be key for local communities' resilience and for citizens' trust in local public institutions. An inspiring example of this is the fact that the call for good practices on open government launched by the AUC with the Congress support resulted in more than 200 applications from Ukrainian municipalities. With electricity cuts, issues related to the delivery of services, dealing with the IDPs, all in all coping with an extraordinary crisis situation, it is indeed inspiring to see local authorities still consistently putting transparency, accountability, and citizens' participation at the center of their local daily governance. The role of local authorities for democratic stability in defending democratic values and protecting human rights in the provision of services to residents is vital and now more than ever. This has been confirmed in a recent survey conducted by the Congress and the AUC on the needs and priorities for further action. The findings of this survey show that local authorities in Ukraine are in the position to respond to multiple war-related crises with resilience, and they have governance tools in place to harness the self-organization capacity of Ukrainian citizens. The survey also gives further ground for our forthcoming cooperation, which is to be implemented in the framework of the new Council of Europe Action Plan for Ukraine 2023 to 2026. The action plan is entitled Resilience, Recovery and Reconstruction. It has been widely discussed with all stakeholders in Ukraine and is to be adopted by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe next week. In this framework, we will continue supporting the dialogue and consultation, coordination and partnership building between central and local authorities. We will foster innovative and collaborative approaches for open government at local level. This will also allow us to make concrete steps in the implementation of a memorandum of understanding, which I had the honor to sign last October on behalf of the Congress, together with the Chief Executive Officer of the Open Government Partnership and the Executive Director of the Association of Ukrainian Cities. This is the very first tripartite agreement, and it complements our joint efforts to improve local governments, further promote co-creation, and ensure broader outreach in support of the renewal of Ukraine and for the benefit of its people. In this endeavor, we will focus on direct support of local authorities in the integration of a human rights-based approach to renewed local policies and strategies. Our aim is to further support youth engagement and strengthen social cohesion and inclusion at a time where it's needed more than ever. Dear friends, we look forward to continuing our fruitful cooperation in the framework of the new action plan, working with central and local level towards the rebuilding of Ukraine on its path to the European Union. Allow me as well to congratulate Secretary of State Jarema for his personal commitment and support to the dialogue. I would also like to express our gratitude to the President of the Association of Ukrainian Municipalities for the mutual trust and openness and commitment in allowing us to work together for the benefit of Ukraine. Last but not least, allow me to reiterate that we stand together with you and with our project team in Kiev and thank them for their hard work, as well as our colleagues in the Congress Secretariat headquarters I think together we will continue and Ukraine will prevail. I thank you all and wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rafael Benitez, for your welcoming words. We have learned that Vitaly Klitschko, Mayor of Kiev and President of the Association of Ukrainian Cities, is not able to join us right now. However, we have members of the AUC Secretariat that will be supporting us in this event, and local authorities, mayors and other representatives that have joined us. I think we have around 70 participants in this meeting, which is, I would say, quite amazing today. So without waiting further, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Yarema. Welcome. Good to see you online this time. And thank you for being with us today.
Доброго дня. Щиро перепрошую за невеличку затримку з підключенням.
Good afternoon. Sorry for slight delay. I experienced slight technical problems. Colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to get involved in to this discussion at this third meeting. Despite difficult times and circumstances, we are able to continue our joint meetings because for our community, the issues of open government, openness, cooperation between central and local authorities is very important. The partnership at this level and the involvement of civic society and NGOs becomes a very important contribution to our victory. Of course, the greatest input is done by the armed forces of Ukraine, and over again, we are thanking our military servicemen, men and women who are defending us against the Russian aggression. Only in unity we can resolve the challenges in the area and help our military, help the IDPs, people who had to flee and experience hardships. The local self-government bodies are doing everything they can to ensure that their communities survive, plus creating conditions to host IDPs. And the whole civic society supports the government, showing the best practices in self-organization and joining efforts with other institutions to resolve extremely difficult problems that Ukraine has faced for the last 9 months. And it's not in vain that this week, this civic society of Ukraine received the award from the Eastern Partnership at the 14th meeting of the Eastern Partnership in the Czech Republic. The Markéta Adamová, the Speaker of the lower chamber of the Czech Parliament, said that the joining of efforts showed that the civic society and political management of the country joined their efforts. That's why deepening this cooperation and the involvement of civic society and joint work with the central and local authorities becomes probably the key factor of our ability to defend ourselves. More than 260 representatives of governments, local self-governments attended the second meeting of our platform when we discussed the possibility of promoting the values of open government, and this is considered to be helpful to overcome corruption, to increase transparency and openness, creating the foundation for the development of civic society, the involvement of youth to decision-making process, and to governance at large. These priorities would be important after our victory, during the renovation of our country, and the government pays attention to this in terms of preparing the action plan on recovering and the involvement of the civic society and the new action plan on introducing the initiative on open government. I would like to thank Olena Sklar, who attended the meetings in discussing this initiative. Our cooperation with the Association of Cities of Ukraine would also contribute to this action plan. At the end, I would like to state that today we have faced challenges not only to win, but also to ensure proper post-war life, and only joining the efforts of all the stakeholders will help us to recover, to renovate the country, and to top the ratings of successful projects. I would like to thank the Association of Ukrainian Cities for partnership and arranging this event. We would be expecting their proposals to the new action plan on introducing the Open Government Partnership Initiative. So thank you, and Godspeed with today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yarema, for your welcoming words. You have put forward the need for local alliances between local authorities, civil society, individual citizens working together to address the challenges currently, but also in the forthcoming period to all jointly prepare for the recovery of the country and of its local territories. We are happy to see that the local authorities have really embarked in this dialogue with the national level, jointly with the AUC, and you have named Ina Sklar, who is now who together now with Svetlana Grishenko, our project manager, will take over and moderate the next session. I would like to give them the floor. I would like to thank Mr. Yarema, thank Rafael Benitez for your words, for your opening and introductory remarks, and wish all participants a very good meeting of the platform, fruitful meeting of the platform. Thank you very much.
Доброго дня, шановні колеги, друзі, представники органів
Good
місцевого
afternoon, colleagues, friends, representatives of local self-government authorities and central authorities, our international colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you at our third meeting of the platform Dialogue Open Governance, the main goal of which was to set consistent, efficient coordination between central and local authorities in implementing the open governance principles in Ukraine. And since Ukraine is now joined the international initiative Open Governance.
Спільно з Асоціацією міст України сьогоднішній захід.
Together with the Association of the Cities of Ukraine, we have planned this meeting today and our current session with the goal to discuss and elaborate potential directions within which the local self-governance authorities can engage into implementation of the action plan of the International Initiative Open Government Partnership 2023-2024 and discuss those ideas that can later be translated into Ukrainian commitments within the framework of the Action Plan Open Government. I also would like to say that this session will be moderated by me and Ina Sklar, who is the expert on legal issues of the Association of Ukrainian Cities. But this session will be moderated by her as the representative of the Association of Ukrainian Cities within the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine and the Open Government Partnership. Before the beginning of our session, you were given the registration form, and it included the questions about your ideas or proposals to the potential action plan. We have very interesting answers. And considering these answers and ideas, we have offered several municipalities to present their views in the form of a 5-minute presentation and express their ideas about the role of local self-governance authorities within the framework of implementation of the next action plan, Open Government. For us to be acquainted with the preparation stage, I would like us to start with the presentation of Natalia Oksha, who is the secretary of the OGP Coordinating Council, and she is also the deputy director of the Department of Information and Communication at the Cabinet of Ministries of Ukraine. And I would like to say one more piece of information. In order to cover all the participants and engage them into this discussion, we would like to offer you a short survey, which now you see on the screen. In your opinion, what areas should be included into the National Action Plan on implementing the initiative Open Government Partnership? And you have the options. You can choose the number of options, and there will be another option, which is the open answer. So you can check a couple of options from the list, or you can include your own option. What may be considered as an idea that will be included into the National Action Plan on implementation of Open Government Partnership. So this is for you right now, and I give the floor to Ms. Natalia Oksha. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you, Svetlana. I would like to congratulate you on the Local Self-Governance Day, which we celebrated recently. And I think that the activities you do is really of utmost importance right now. Talking about the national plan on implementing the initiative Open Government Partnership, it will be action plan number 6. And it will include the priorities discussed at the European Regional Meeting, mentioned by the State Secretary, Alexander Yarema. And I would like to remind you that the discussion was about the priority issues for a number of countries. And these are the following issues: combating corruption, accountability and transparency of authorities. Also, we should mention here the issue of open data. Of equal importance is the issue of creating conditions for civil society development and ensuring space for development of civil society. We also discussed the issues of access to public information and dissemination of this public information. As a coordination council, we currently have been working on the preparation plan for this action plan number 6. It will be made public in the nearest future after the coordination council will approve it. And we think that considering the conditions we are in now, we think the majority of actions will be held online. As a rule, we collect all the proposals via electronic forms, via emails, and that enables us to cover lots of participants who will be able to send their proposals to the new action plan. Apart from this, we plan a number of online events. And during these events, we plan to discuss the priority issues that I have already mentioned, such as combating corruption, creating conditions for civil society development, and for Ukraine, the right number of other priorities mentioned by Mr. Yarema, and these issues are related to restoration and rebuilding of Ukraine. And we think that within our action plan, Open Government, we should include a number of events aimed at restoration and rebuilding of Ukraine. And it is important here to ensure cooperation between the state, national and local authorities, business communities and civil society, as well as private circles. We have previously discussed with the Coordination Council that this action plan will not probably be as extensive as before, and we focus on implementation of a number of commitments which will be implemented in partnership with the other stakeholders. Apart from this, we envisage that there will be very close cooperation with the steering committee of the Open Government Partnership, because at the meeting with Sanjay Griffin, who is the director of this initiative, and the meeting took place in October during the European meeting. He supported Ukraine and he assured us that they are ready to provide support to us in the implementation of this new action plan. The issues I would like us to focus on during this meeting and also later when you prepare your proposals for the new action plan are the following ones. We should think what could foster cooperation between local authorities and civil society, business community. We have discussed the possibility of establishing hubs, as we have seen that creation of such space for cooperation with volunteers, for engaging youth communities and public associations are more and more becoming more and more popular, and is a good practice to use by all the participants, by all the municipalities. It's a good chance to share experience and to create a number of platforms where this cooperation will be sustainable and continuous. And I do hope that the hubs that will be established or were established for IDPs will focus their attention on organizing civil society, because we have felt this support on the part of civil society when it organized itself and assisted the local authorities and the state authorities in combating and countering Russian aggression. Also, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that all the commitments, the proposals will be submitted to, will be evaluated according to the main criteria and values of the initiative. It means that the proposals should include such issues as access to public information, or issues of interacting with the public, or such issues as accountability and transparency, as well as implementation of ITs to ensure accountability and transparency. Definitely not just one value should be used. There may be 2 or 3 or 4 of them. That means all of them. But these things will be in the focus of Coordination Council when we are going to select the proposals sent by you. The plan will encompass 2 years, 2023, 2024, and we hope it will start in July 2023, and it will actually probably cover also June 2025. And I have already mentioned that we now prepare the schedule of the plan, the timetable of the plan, and I hope that in January we'll be able to launch our online discussions for us to have the plan ready till July 2023. I encourage you to follow our initiative in Facebook, initiative Open Government Partnership in Ukraine. And this Facebook page will place the information about the beginning of the discussions. And we'll be happy to get the proposals from you. You can send the proposals to the Association of Ukrainian Cities. So I wish you fruitful work today, and I do hope that we'll be safe and Ukraine will have its victory soon. Thank you for your attention, and I wish all of us a good day. Thank you, Natalia, for updating us on the process, on the preparation of this action plan, Open Government Partnership. And I think that our meeting today is really timely because we have time and we have this very big representative audience of the communities, and it enables us to elaborate the directions that later will be included into the National Action Plan. You have mentioned that this action plan will include a number of commitments. It won't be very extensive. Therefore, it is important for us to formulate specific, concrete areas that will be implemented and will ensure good cooperation between the central and local authorities and civil society. And your idea that we really should foster setting up these public spaces, hubs, as you've said, which could serve the places for the representatives of local authorities, civil society, and business community. And these hubs and these public spaces could be initiated and supported by local authorities. I think this idea really is good, and I think it can be supported within the frameworks of the National Action Plan. I encourage our participants, and we see that the number of our participants today is growing, to be proactive in the discussion. We definitely won't be able to cover today all the proposals and discuss all the proposals, but the survey we do today will be a good basis for us to formulate the proposals that will be studied during January before the National Action Plan is approved. According to our agenda, we planned the presentation of Alexander Slobozhan, who is Executive Director of the Association of Ukrainian Cities. But I have just been informed that he has some issues with connection, and he will be able to join us in about 5 minutes. Therefore, I suggest that now we give the floor to the representative of Bucha. What ideas Bucha has regarding the areas or directions that can be included into the National Action Plan, particularly with focus on rebuilding and enhancing resilience of our communities. So I give the floor to the representative of Bucha. This is Mr. Lubomir Janov, who is the head of Bucha Youth Council. Good afternoon. Thank you for invitation. I'm very sorry I somehow cannot have my video on. Once again, thank you very much for invitation. And it's really good that the town of Bucha is engaged into this discussion on the rebuilding and restoration of Ukraine, because unfortunately we know how complicated this rebuilding process is, because we actually faced all the problems related to this process. Talking about rebuilding, I'll mention such a tool as Youth Council, because it has been 2 years that I have become the head of Bucha territorial community and Youth Council. And the issues faced by Youth Council related to the current situation are really serious. And the very tool of Youth Council, when we are talking about rebuilding, is really powerful. What were our activities before the beginning of full-scale invasion? There were different types of events related to youth policy. We were engaged in advocacy and volunteer programs. Later, we get on a more serious level. We started analyzing youth infrastructure available in our town, and we were trying to introduce new elements of youth infrastructure. And we have even elaborated the youth infrastructure development support program in Bucha. And we managed to approve this program at the session of the city council, actually on the 24th of February, the day of beginning of full-scale invasion. And it was small but very positive news for our youth community. If we are talking about our plans for the future, then all the youth communities faced a number of additional problems. Lots of young and active people had to leave the country for a certain period of time, and therefore now they are not active in the youth policy processes. Probably just because they are abroad. Unfortunately, they cannot be proactive right now. This is the forced migration process. And another issue is decrease of funding for the development of youth policy, definitely for very objective and valid reasons. As we were very active regarding development of youth infrastructure, we tried to think how we still can establish this youth infrastructure in our city in cooperation with the Association of Youth Councils of Ukraine. And we tried to elaborate certain provisions and norms, how these youth hubs, youth spaces can be created in shelters, which are established in communities. Well, funding in the communities is available, but it is spent on civil defense.
Організувати молодіжну роботу в укриттях, то це вже буде.
If we are able to offer the youth the ability to work in the bomb shelters, that would be triple use facilities, basically, where you can conduct safe events and get a proper shelter during air raid alarms. Now, we also cooperate with the Association of Youth Councils, that's at the central national level, because this association is actively drafting the concept paper on the youth policy. The first part, how to relaunch the youth movement, but the second part is dedicated to restoration of the proper infrastructure, because after we deoccupy our territories, there would be numerous challenges and problems with ruined youth infrastructure, like it was in Kyiv region, because youth activities could not be contained only online. It has to have some sites for offline events as well. I believe that the youth councils during the invasion proved to be formidable bastions of volunteers' work. Our youth council, after the occupation of Bucha, we came back immediately. We started volunteering in our volunteer center. Then we started carrying out the security training sessions on demining. In particular, we also allowed the people's participation in our ongoing analysis of what needs to be contributed to the recovery of the city. So if you still don't have such youth councils established in your communities, please do, because the youth can generate lots of advantages by bringing in their energy, some fresh take on certain things, and let's not forget about the personnel reserved for the local self-government authorities. Also, proactive youth is a sign that your community would be flourishing, because right now we have a huge problem of immigration. So if you don't take into consideration the youth in planning for the future, well then who those plans are for then? If you don't have the youth council in your community, I believe that you need to establish one, and then of course you will start asking the questions where to find such proactive young people. Well, the youth policy starts being shaped around the universities and colleges, around their self-governance bodies. But if you don't have a college in your community, you have secondary schools. So you need to search for proactive youth there to avoid the gap between the local self-government and the youth council, because when young people grow up, they leave the community and don't contribute to the community. So it's important to support them and involve them in all of the processes that are happening, not only in terms of the youth policy, but also getting them involved in discussing, for instance, the general plan or renaming the streets or the community budget. You need, to the maximum extent possible, attract the youth to the important activities of the community. They need to feel part of the team, that their thoughts are valuable to you. So if you want to open your local youth council, cooperate with the oblast level youth councils, because their main job is to arrange networking between the local youth councils. So such oblast level youth councils will help you to conduct strategic sessions, workshops, training classes, and the association of the youth councils could be helpful in this as well, because they generate lots of manuals, booklets, recommendations, guidelines how to launch the youth councils. And summing up, I would like to state that judging by how proactive and patriotic our youth is, we will definitely win. The youth will be able to rebuild this country and to make it strong, powerful, so that no one would ever dream of encroaching on it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lubomir. Of course, we will definitely win. And among the contributing factors are, of course, the territorial defense units of our communities and the proactive activists who, despite the fighting, despite the martial law, are designing and adapting the new forms of attracting the youth. They're thinking about the future, and they're doing everything they can so that all our plans for the future would turn into reality. And the conclusion from your speech for me was that it's worth to start thinking about the renovation of the youth infrastructure in the post-war period, involve the youth in decision-making process now through the work of the youth councils. Another important message that I heard is the need to join the efforts of the youth councils from different oblast regions of Ukraine. This is a true networking of youth councils and opening public spaces for the youth, which coincides and echoes quite well with the initiative of creating public hubs and public spaces as the way to renovate the efficient youth infrastructure in the communities. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alexander Slobozhan. Are you with us now? Apparently not. Well, we'll be waiting for him to join us. And the next thing I would like to tell you that in the previous National Action Plan, which is still viable until the end of this year, but since we are at war now,
вона напрацьовує методики нові. У нас новий учасник, якщо
local youth governments. Oh, we have a new participant singing. So they come up with a new guidelines and methodologies and approaches so that the youth infrastructure would be efficient under current conditions, but also recognizing that the youth will be proactively involved in rebuilding the community. So now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mikhail Natizhuk from the Fastiv town mayor. Share with us those key issues that Fastiv municipality, based on the experience of attracting the youth. So what do you think could be then shared with the National Action Plan? But before Mr. Mikhailov takes the floor, I would like to offer the participants to give the feedback to the speech of Mr. Lubomir, because since Mr. Lubomir pointed out on certain problems in how to make the youth interested into decision-making process, how your community increases the interest of the youth to make sure that they get involved, that they become proactive, that they start caring about the challenges of the community. So what are the motivations and the incentives? So this question has been posted in the chat, so you can contribute your answers. And but also I would like to remind you about the general survey that we also ask you to fill in. Mr. Mikhailo, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to comment and share my own opinion on how to get the youth interested, using as an example Fastiv local territorial community. We can see and we can feel that the youth is interested to get involved to resolving the challenges of the community only when they see that their efforts are not fruitless, when they feel that they can not only join the efforts with us, but also that there are some tangible output results that their efforts generate. That's the cornerstone, I believe, around which we should build the trust in the community and cooperation. Our civil council is very proactive. It proved that it can join the efforts to defend the town at the beginning of this aggressive invasion. The chairperson of the youth council is also the member of the executive committee of the Fastiv City Hall. The members of the youth council, according to the decision of the city hall, have the right to attend all of the Commission
засідання міської ради.
meetings of the executive committee and the city council as not only observers but advisors in order to share their opinions, and their opinions are that reflect the needs and interests of the youth. But today I would like to talk about slightly different thing. What should we expect to see after the victory? What would be the post-war challenges? And it's great that even now we start discussing the joint action plan in this regard, what needs to be done. So currently, the whole society and each and every community they joined their efforts because we have one common goal, our victory. When you have that goal in mind at all times, then you recognize that day and night we need to contribute to bringing that victory closer. But at the same time, after the victory, in our communities, we would have certain, might arise certain issues related to the hardships of the post-war period, because as Mr. Yerema correctly mentioned, there will be issues of veterans to be resolved, IDPs, internally displaced persons. We have people who suffered from the war, those who had to get evacuated. Some of our residents are staying abroad now, and after the war is over, when the borders are open again, the question would be, will the wife with kids go back to her husband, or the husband will join the family abroad? At the same time, we recognize that this country has to be rebuilt. So the whole society and each of our community has to have the unity of opinion on that, and hopefully to have the common goal to deliver. I am convinced that such goal should be the recovery of the country and European integration as one of our highest priorities, so that the lifestyle in our communities would meet European standards. And in this context, we place our hopes first and foremost on the youth as the proactive stratum of our society. That it's the youth that would become an engine helping to push our country towards Europe, because the youth now, through their actions, prove that they do care. And again, most of the troops in the armed forces of Ukraine are the youth. Volunteers are mostly young people, and the youth is also very proactive in the rear to meet the needs of defending the country. And in the new action plan, we will have to focus the attention on supporting the youth and realistic involvement of them to decision-making process and implementation of the policies, both at the national and local levels. Even before the war, I pointed out my conviction that the electoral code of Ukraine should be modified, like they have quota of at least 30% of representatives in local political party lists should be representatives of both genders. So that in party lists we'll have not less than 30% of young candidates, young people. Only this way we can ensure realistic representation of the youth in local councils and probably even in the national parliament, something that would allow, not in words, but in deeds, to help the youth implement their needs and interests through the national policies. Also, it's extremely important that even now we start preparing our youth to be responsible in getting involved in the work for the recovery of the country at large and local communities. So we need to start thinking about the ability to train our youth on the basics of the local self-government, like what is the local budget, what needs to be done to come up with the project and implement it. Such network of schools or training centers should cover as many communities in Ukraine as possible. And probably that will be also done in a networking fashion, helping to cover the majority of the youth, how in compliance with the European principles and approaches, to implement youth initiatives through local policies. Of course, we need public spaces for that. And the importance of such spaces in rebuilding the country will be explained by new circumstances. There are lots of young IDPs who need to get re-socialized in the new communities. Also, another issue would be re-socialization of demobilized military troops, servicemen. So these might be joined youth public spaces so that the residents and the youth in particular to find alike-thinking people, formulate the initiatives and join efforts to implement those initiatives at the national and local level. So the tasks are quite serious indeed, and I think that only by joining our efforts we'll be able to overcome them. As to the action plan, let me repeat myself once again. It's great that we are discussing it now, because by and large, we don't have that much time left, and we need to start getting prepared for the rebuilding and recovery of the country, which I believe will happen soon after our great Ukrainian victory. Thank you. Thank you, Mihaila. The experience of Fastiev municipality in involving youth is very interesting for many years now, by the way, and I would like to point out one important issue that the mayor has pointed out, the training of the youth so that they would learn what the local self-government is all about, what are their chances to get involved into the decision-making process. So this is the task for us both for today and tomorrow. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alexander Slobozhan, Executive Director of the Association of Cities of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for the fact that despite of the technical difficulties that you managed to join us. The floor is yours. Hello.
Дякую Раді Європи, нашому проєкту за
Good
можливість.
morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Council of Europe, for the opportunity to organize this meeting and for your systemic support, not only regarding the open governance issues, but also supporting Ukrainian municipalities. This is very important for us. We have had our pathway regarding these issues, and we have communicated with the Cabinet of Ministers the role of municipalities within this process. And now, at this meeting, we have already specific proposals we have very specific discussion. And I would like still to remind us what we have started with before it has become a mainstream. I would like to mention those cities that will assist us. And I will try to mention those who were members of the previous task forces. These are city and village communities and small towns and medium-sized towns, as well as oblast cities and the capital of Ukraine. They are cities with millions of population. I would like to remind that there was an exception made for Ukraine, and our communities were given the opportunity to participate in the competition. 3 communities, Vinnytsia, Ternopil and Khmelnytsky, have been awarded for open governance and for the practices they have implemented. Now these practices will be included into the legal provisions and will be disseminated among the communities. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that when we were trying to set up the focus group, we were trying to engage even the smallest communities who assisted us to draft our key tasks. Some of these tasks have already been resolved, and now we are at the next stage, and we try to elaborate specific proposals to the national action plan. There is a specific block on our agenda today, which is open government local level, the role of local self-governance authorities. The corresponding memorandum has been signed with OGP, with the global organization that deals with these issues. And now here we have lots of people, representatives of those communities. We have recently announced the competition, the Unbroken Stories, the Stories of Unbroken, and there are 3 categories: cohesion, youth engagement, and e-governance. These are 3 components which, in our opinion, are the pillars of open government. And the previous speakers have already mentioned it. I would like to share my impressions. 120 communities participated in this competition. Now this is the final procedure and taking place, and in the nearest future you will get the information about the results of the competition. And I personally was impressed with the stories offered by the communities in the area of youth engagement, implementation of electronic things, and cohesion projects. There is one point I would like to mention. If several years ago, when we were communicating with the communities and civil servants at the municipalities about the financial topics or utility topics, for the majority of them, usage of Viber or Google Forms was something a bit complicated. Then now, from these stories of Unbroken, we see that chatbot is something very typical to provide information for the population, or creation of a certain electronic platform, engaging youth through volunteer headquarters, youth councils, youth parliaments. You probably remember how in the past we started with participatory budget. So I think that if we set global goals for us, we'll be able to achieve them. We see the global best practices, but we also have already Ukrainian best practices that should be implemented. In conclusion, I would like to say, and I think it will be included into the national strategic documents, the Dear colleagues, the conditions Ukraine finds itself in right now, we do need a joint communicative strategy between central and local authorities, and I'll provide some practical examples. We are talking about power outage schedules. When we were trying to analyze this situation and why there are so many unsatisfied people and we see a number of protests against it, it's necessary to communicate the information about the electricity availability schedules. We should state that this is caused by the aggression of the Russian Federation. We are talking about the Holodomor. This is the fight and war against the civilians. We are talking about the missile strikes to the infrastructure facilities, and we should communicate it correctly. All the authorities are united about it, and we should not separate ourselves from these problems, but we should communicate it properly. Why on the same street there are buildings which are switched off and there are buildings which have the electricity? And the same situation is about heating. Dear colleagues, there are some differences in these things, and these differences are caused by the distribution issues and damage of distribution facilities. And we are talking about these military actions of the Russian Federation. And we are talking about just restoration and repairing a certain electricity distribution point, and sometimes it is not possible to do it quickly because there is no equipment to do it. We do hope our partners will be able to assist us, but definitely it cannot be done immediately. So the focus should be on the correct communication. If we communicate all these issues properly, there will be less dissatisfaction. We have the strategy, we have open government tools available, and it means that the citizens implement this strategy and assist the local authorities. Lots of people try to use the power generators, and again, there are lots of examples when the citizens assisted the councils and local communities. According to the legislation, there should be some permits to use these issues, and there were amendments introduced into legislation regarding exemption from such payments. How it became possible? Through communication between the authorities and the community, between the authorities and business, through engagement of young activists, young people who have a different look at a number of issues and who sometimes provide out of the box solutions. Thank you for being probably too practical. But these are the major concerns we face right now. And I would like to say that these small examples make the state policy in a number of state sectors. I'm talking about the Ukrainian economy, I'm talking about our international relationship. Owing to such tools as open government, direct communication, youth engagement, we can bring together the communities and focus the attention of the communities to resolution of certain issues, which are the priority issues. And preparation and setting tasks for the National Action Plan is not something abstract. I have just provided one example about electricity and heating. So this action plan is about this, about satisfaction of the requests of the community. Thank you very much for attention, and I encourage you to take a different look at these problematic issues, to start thinking out of the box, to not to think that something is not possible. Just several years ago, we heard that it is impossible for some small communities to create their own chatbots. People said, wow, how it can be done, why it should be done. And war is a huge crisis situation, but every crisis is the opportunity for implementing new tools, new technologies, and in our opinion, open government and open government tools provide these opportunities. Why I have been talking about these stories of Unbroken and why we have had these ideas to collect these stories and to disseminate these stories among the communities. We wanted all the communities to see these stories and to see how the other communities solved similar problems. Every story can be extrapolated onto other communities, can be relocated, so to say, can be used at the other levels. And I wish all of us fruitful cooperation today. I encourage you to be proactive. I encourage you to pose questions, to express your proposals, because these events become the platform to certain things that are later introduced into the state policy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alexander, for providing these examples, very practical examples. And thank you for showing the pathway from these practical things to the sustainable strategy or program or efficient cooperation platform between the authorities and communities. I'm talking about communication strategy that would enhance the trust between authorities and the community and ensure sustainability of community development. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in the chat we have a number of comments of our participants, and we see that these are comments to the presentations we have heard about youth councils and development of youth infrastructure. So at the end of this session, we'll try to address your proposals and answer your questions. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Vatutin City Council from Cherkasy region, Ms. Valentina Kravchenko. How do you see the future national action plan, open government, from the viewpoint of your community regarding rebuilding of Ukraine and overcoming the war situation and rebuilding of this Ukraine in post-war period? Good afternoon, dear participants. Thank you, dear organizers, for the opportunity to express our proposals to the National Action Plan. Establishing effective communication and engaging the institutes of civil society to governance is a guarantee for constructive dialogue in the community. And public councils should be of great assistance. They are formed according to the resolution of the Cabinet of Ukraine that dates back to 2010. But I would like to mention several issues regarding the composition of these public associations or councils. Some of them do not want to join the preparation stage, but finally, when they start their activities, they would like to become the member of the municipality. But unfortunately, there are no procedures. to do it. There are a number of public organizations that, for example, do not have a 6-month period of public activity, but would like to participate in the public council, and therefore they cannot become the member of this public council. And therefore, this Institute of Public Civil Society cannot become the member of the public council. Another issue is that among the composition of such councils, we cannot have the representatives of civil societies who are the public deputies, the deputies of Ukraine, state deputies of the Crimea, or who occupy positions in the executive authorities. We have the situation that 2 representatives of the public council were elected the deputies, and therefore they could not working in the public council, and therefore there were minus 2 members. And it means that the membership may be only individual, and it is impossible to replace the member of the public council. So it is good if it is possible for the civil society institutes to be able to delegate another representative and to fortunately there is interruption in the connection. I see that there are some internet connection issues, but I hope that it will be restored. Miss Valentina, can you reconnect? Looks like that Valentina has addressed a very important issue, which is related to regulatory framework on public councils. And definitely the current conditions enable us to say that we have to remove certain gaps in legislation in order to make the infrastructure of public spaces and activity of public councils, including the youth councils, to make their activities more open, more functional. The one that can be flexible enough regarding responding to the current situation, particularly when we are talking about inclusion into the public councils of internally displaced people. Miss Valentina, are you with us? Unfortunately, Valentina has disconnected. When she reconnects, we may come back to her presentation and give her the chance to express her ideas. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative of the City Council, who is the leader. I'm talking about the City Council, which is the leader in the partnership Open Government. This City Council is one of the 3 winners of the international competition of OPG, and I'm really happy that we have such an experienced participant who can share her views regarding the future, taking into account that Vinnytsia City Council has huge experience regarding implementation of open government principles, transparency, accountability, and inclusion engagement. Ms. Olena Orlenko, you have the floor.
Пані Олено, у вас, мабуть, що мікрофон трошки далі від вас, якщо можна, збільшіть звук. Або мікрофон трохи ближче. На жаль, ні. На жаль, звук.
Unfortunately, there's no sound.
Так
How
добре.
about now?
Так, я думаю, буде
Now
краще.
it's better.
Дякую вам.
Так, вітаю всіх учасників та організаторів
I'd like to
зустрічі.
welcome all of the participants and thank the organizers first. Let me share the experience of Vinnytsia in implementing the initiative partnership open government on the local level. Back in 2020, Vinnytsia was selected to join the program Open Government Local Level as part of the Open Government Initiative. As a result of the joint efforts of the City Hall and all of the proactive activities. Since then, we carried out 12 training modules where the participants learned about the best practices and innovations in open governance topic. We have also created the hub for open governance local level. We conducted meetings with the coordinators of OGP, the Office of the Council of Europe in Ukraine, and networked with other members of the project and supported donor support from International Center for Not-for-Profit Law.
Вінницькій міській територіальній громаді ініціативи партнерства «Відкритий уряд» у 2021-2023 році.
Plan for Vinnytsia City was approved in July 2021 for 3 years until 2023, including the activities that will allow the residents of the community, an amalgamated community, to be assistants and advisors to the City Hall and improve the institutional capabilities. Vinnytsia was awarded with OGP Local Innovation Awards, and that was our commitment in the action plan. And the commitment was to create the network of cooperation offices to use and explain how to use participation tools using the experience of other hubs. These are public spaces of participative platform of new settlements in our amalgamated community so that they feel part of the Vinnytsia community and be ready to get involved to help pass decisions of local self-government authorities. All that was before the full-fledged Russian invasion. Since then, all the attention was focused on continuous work of the infrastructure of the city and helping to deliver humanitarian assistance to more than 47,000 IDPs in our city. We involved NGOs, the Charity Foundation, that was the partner of this initiative, together with the Vinnytsia City Hall, created the humanitarian hub, which received more than 100,000 tons from 16 countries. This humanitarian aid has been shared between IDPs, and we also help those cities and towns in Ukraine that suffered the most from the agency. The regional council, being another partner of this initiative, created a local shelter center which works as the hub for shelters, and experts, activists, NGOs, and public authorities can meet in that hub together with donors and charity organizations. The Regional Development Center has provided 13 shelters with the needed equipment, kitchen, appliances, foodstuffs. Okay, my phone drops down. Also, at the website of Vinnytsia City Hall, we created new services. First of all, for IDPs, the reference book for IDPs, the service of announcements to the population, and useful advice in the time of war. Also, the development of open governance haven't stopped during the war. Why? Because open governance is one of the important aspects of the lifestyle lifestyle. When people got involved in the decision process, we receive petitions, pass decisions, conduct public hearings, use other participatory tools that unite the residents. And that helps to consolidate the society to fight the Russian aggression. Я, Mariupol hub, Я, Kherson hub, and Luhansk Moya hub were opened in Vinnytsia. The involvement in this initiative allows the cities to learn how to use the international experience on open governance and let the residents learn more about the achievements of other cities in Ukraine and network with other cities. It's important during the war to disseminate information about the real state of affairs in Ukraine. At the previous meeting of the OGP initiative that happens in Rome with the involvement of Ukrainian delegation headed by Alexander Yeremenko, Ukraine received the full support from the chief executive director of Open Governance and all of the participants of that meeting, which inspires us for further fight for our joint victory. As to the National Action Plan design, they proposed bullets. I like them a lot because I recognize that they would be extremely important for rebuilding our country, but the focus for me was on the initiatives to protect the environment. We know about the Green Course initiative at the EU level, which might involve lots of investments to help carry out such a course in Vinnytsia with the support of GIZ and their experts. At the beginning of this year, we have approved the Green Course for Vinnytsia, plus the roadmap to implement that plan until 2030. Protection of our environment, all the ecological issues are very relevant issues for the rebuilding and recovery of the country in the future. Also, the use of educational tools for the inclusion of IDPs. Like I said, we have more than 47,000 IDPs in Vinnytsia, and it's extremely important to involve them in the life of the city so that they wouldn't feel that they are alien in our city. Instead, they should feel that they're home, that they are included into the life of the city and can impact the decisions. As to the hubs, social pubs that I mentioned before, one more thing to add is that in Vinnytsia back in 2018, Cities for Cities hub has been established. At that time, we were the first in Ukraine to foster intersectoral dialogue between local authorities, NGOs, and businesses. The hub became the platform for the cooperation of the civil society and the local authorities. The civil network of Cities for Cities now combines 47 public organizations. And last year, we signed a memorandum on partnership with the Cities for Cities network and City Hall. And in compliance with this memorandum, we established the Entrepreneurs Council headed by the mayor with the involvement of civic society. This council carries out periodic meetings where important issues pertaining to the development of the city are being discussed, identifying how to foster cooperation between the civil society and the city authorities. Now that we discuss the need for the whole country to start opening social hubs, Vinnytsia will be the place that you can come to because we have lots to share based on our experience. As to Youth Council, it exists in Vinnytsia for a long time now, being very proactive, and now in the time of war is very much involved in the volunteers activities, constantly contributing to the work in the clinics and other social places. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Олено, за те,
Thank
що
you,
в
Ms.
такий
Olena.
час, буквально декілька хвилин,
That
змогли
it took you only a couple of minutes, but still you managed to present
досвід і різноманітний досвід Вінниці.
a very rich and diverse experience of Vinnytsia city, in particular in regards of opening up and functioning of open public spaces, especially focused on the IDPs who came to you from Kherson, Mariupol, Luhansk region. That's extremely valuable experience for all our communities. Also, you have voiced out very important issues like we learned that the youth policy, the inclusion and involvement of the youth should definitely be part and parcel of the National Action Plan. And you voiced out additional topics that are worth being discussed in terms of the involvement of the local self-government authorities in regard of the protection of the environment, of the ecology, and resocialization training programs offered for IDPs so that they could easier integrate into the life of the new communities. Esteemed colleagues, this session stipulates an answer to yet another question voiced out by Mr. Alexander Slobozhan, the cooperation between central and local authorities. I ask you to look at the second question: what needs to be done to improve the efficient ongoing dialogue between the central and local authorities? Here, we're talking about open governance, so please, whenever you're ready, it will be grateful if you share your opinion and your position on that subject matter. While you answer this question and filling in the questionnaire on the priorities, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Ina Sklar, a new moderator. Ms. Ina, you have heard what was voiced out already, but what needs to be done more to promote the National Action Plan from the standpoint of involving local authorities? Thank you, Svetlana, and thank you all of you who joined us despite of everything. We are fighting at lots of fronts, so great thanks to those who joined and those who failed to join now for various reasons. At least would be able to view the recording of this event, which is extremely useful. What I would like to start with: municipalities in the time of fighting with such challenges as COVID, first now military aggression, prove that they are ready to be responsible, not only take those responsibilities, but effectively implement efficient tools, take care of their residents, despite the difficulties, lack of understanding, lack of funding. Even today, despite blackouts and lack of internet access, we manage to get involved into this discussion. So hopefully in the nearest future we'll have the National Action Plan ready, which would allow us to be proud for it. But first, let's focus on fewer commitments on the one hand, but at the same time, what we see as the Association of Cities of Ukraine and me as the member of the Coordination Council, the action plan should have the focus on the involvement of local authorities amalgamated territorial communities are ready for that, and we need to facilitate the involvement of the local self-government authorities, and you prove that with your actions, with your speeches, and the fact that we are fighting and standing strong for the 10th month. Such tools as youth councils are well known in Ukraine for a long time now. They are viable, but each community has its own algorithm and its own tool set that could, on the one hand, make them available, user-friendly, and popular, and or could result that they are being ignored. So that's what colleagues suggested in the chat. We need to look for such tools that would both facilitate the participation and somehow make it more proactive. Probably one of the commitments here might be involvement of the youth to the local self-government initiatives, because in our current national action plan, there are some commitments in regards of the youth, but let's make the focus on the local communities. And Miroslav has mentioned that we need to focus on youth, the recovery of youth infrastructure. That's extremely important, the infrastructure for the youth movement, because the youth can exist in virtual reality, but sooner or later they will have to go to places that provides them with some youth infrastructure. As to the civil councils, well, even though our speaker dropped down, but there were important messages there, and unfortunately Ms. Valentina didn't mention what is the focus on IDPs, because they are usually very proactive citizens, and they're worth to be integrated into the life of the community they relocated to. So probably it's worth thinking how our action plan should take into consideration the need to integrate IDPs using the practical experience of Ms. Valentina. The most valuable thing that we might have, the combination of the theory and practices, can allow Ukraine to generate the best results. The experience of Vinnytsia, as always, it's so inspiring. And when we work with the communities trying to explain to them what the open governance is all about, we share the experience of our leaders, Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky, Ternopil, that are at the top of the ratings and are positively shocking the foreigners in terms of their deliverables, and such good practices should be disseminated, and our association will try to make sure that the experience of the communities through networking, through exchange of practices, would be shared to others. And again, Vinnytsia already has the action plan, and we tried to design action plans for 3 more communities, and we believe that the action plans for local level could be included into the national action plan as commitments, which would allow to increase the value of this tool and the value of the open governance, which would not be dependable on the emotions on a few individuals, but would be governed by relevant regulations.
Момент як запровадження можливо радника з відкритого.
We also see another issue as introducing the position of the advisor on open government in local councils. We are ready to assist with this issue as association, and we hope that it will be also introduced into the national action plan. It's really difficult to start from scratch, and if we have such assistance, and with the support of the Congress and with the support of this international initiative as OGP, we can implement these efficient tools that will be used as the basis to support each and every territorial community, taking into account the specificity of its activity. And the national program of open government at the local level can be introduced into the national action plan. We can think about a cohort of experts that will assist, that will probably provide some guidelines and foster experience, sharing experience. And there can be interaction platform for local authorities where the municipalities will be able to discuss or exchange the regulatory framework and discuss the actions on the part of the state authorities to ensure accountability and transparency, and we can use the modern innovative approaches. So briefly, this is everything from me, and I think that we shall hear many other interesting and innovative things today. Thank you. Thank you, Inna. I'm really grateful for what you have said, and I think that association really will have to do many things in order to generalize these ideas and proposals. And you, as the member of the Coordination Council at the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, you will also have to do a lot in order to coordinate these issues, taking into account the open governance principles at the local and state level. Dear participants, right now we were trying to discuss our all-Ukrainian national context when we are talking about the National Action Plan for 2023-24 and the role of local self-government authorities in the implementation of this plan. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat of the International Initiative of OGP, who will update us what is the future of the open government partnership, the local level, what will happen next, what are the priorities, and probably will outline the interaction mechanism between the local and central authorities. I give the floor to Jose Maria Marin, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It is always an honor to be here and to be able to share and listen with all of you about how we can make sure that the open government includes local level as well. I know that you've been starting the co-creation process for the National OGP Action Plan. And it is wonderful to see how through this initiative from the Council of Europe in collaboration with the partners in Ukraine, a conversation is starting on how to integrate the local perspective into the National Action Plan. First of all, I also want to thank all of you for your presence to this session. And I continue, as was said before, by others, to be in complete amazement of your valor and of your resilience despite the current context in the Ukraine. So always it is an honor to be in the presence of such dedicated and amazing colleagues that are not only fighting for freedom, but also fighting for democracy and open government. Now, from the perspective of the OGP local, which is whom I'm representing at this meeting right now, it is very important that we work in different strands to be able to advance open government at the local level. As you have seen and heard, we have our local members, which include Vinnytsia, also Khmelnytsky and Ternopil, and they are working on implementing their action plans with those commitments that are very much relevant to their context. However, there are other many ways in which we can spread open government. One of them is what we're doing here, which is being able to obtain ideas and to be able to integrate commitments into the National Action Plan process, which is a really great way in order not only to be able to make sure that the National Action Plan has a perspective that goes beyond the top level, but also integrates an open state view. That means that open government is not only to be done at the top national level, but it is a view of how the public administrations within the entire country should be innovating in being able to include citizens that are willing and able to participate in the public policies. Now, given the current context, but also the vast complex problems that we're being faced in society, it's even more important that the national and the local level work together to identify what are those mechanisms, what are those spaces, what does civil society and citizens need to be able to work in conjunction with their governments, with their public institutions, and be able to solve and give solutions that are identified together, but also implemented together to some of these very pressing problems. Now, there are very many different ways in which we can co-create. And I think this is one example of how we can co-create, to be able to bring together experts and knowledgeable leaders at the local level to be able to share their expertise and thoughts about how to integrate and some really good suggestions on advancing open government at the local level. But there are many more aspects in which we can continue to work on. There are public consultations that could be done online and in presence. There could be standing groups within the process that continue to provide feedback by being able to integrating and giving a seat, whether to associations or the association of local municipalities, other representative groups, or some interested local governments themselves within the process. Despite all these different ways in which we can have dialogue and cooperation between the local level leaders as well as the national level OGP co-creation process, I think what's important is that the form follows the function. This means that we're able to identify what's a way in which we can really ensure that there is participation and a continuous dialogue between the local level and the national level processes. And I think that the best process and the best form for this is something that needs to be identified by all of you, because it needs to work for you. Now, congratulations again on this first step for that discussion to continue to happen, and very much look forward to being able to support the outcomes of this exercise. One of the things that we want to do for next year is really work with local governments, also honoring our agreement that Rafael Benitez also mentioned with the Association of Ukrainian Municipalities, but also with the Council of Europe, to be able to find different and innovative ways in which we can advance open government at the local level, beyond simply being a member of OGP Local. So the strands of work would be to continue to support the implementation and the co-creation, and really developing some of those wonderful ideas and commitments around open government at the local level with our members, but also working with the association, with the Council of Europe and other partners that be interested in finding ways to build capacity, finding ways in which we can support the identification of innovative solutions for implementation at the local level. And one of the very important things for us is to be able to demonstrate and to show that in Ukraine, but also in many other local governments around the world that are part of the OGP, is that we're demonstrating with evidence how collaboration, how open government is really changing the way in which government is being run, and how service delivery is being done differently and better, how policies are being delivered in a different, more efficient way. All of this thanks to being able to work together, government, civil society, citizens, and businesses, to be able to tackle some of the most pressing challenges we have now. With that, I want to thank you once again. It's a real pleasure to be here. And of course, reiterate our commitment to be able to continue to support and work with the leaders of open government at the local and national level to make sure that open government is a joint endeavor that goes across levels of government for the betterment and improvement of democracy and the people. Thank you very much.
Дякую вам дуже. Безперечно, українські громади
Thank you very much. Definitely, Ukrainian communities demonstrate the capacity and readiness to be engaged into the initiative Open Government Partnership and demonstrate their readiness to implement three principles of open government: openness, accountability, and engagement. And at the end of this session, I would like to present you the results of our online survey about main areas and directions that can be considered in the development of a new action plan for 2023-2024. And I ask our colleagues to show the infographics. 80% of our participants participated in this thematic meeting today. And here is the results. As far as I see, 58% support, including the commitment on engaging youth by means of youth councils. This is the first place. On the second place, we see creation of electronic platform for interaction with the central authorities, executive authorities. And I understand that here we probably also mean development of communication strategies, like coordinating the positions between the central and local level. No, I'm sorry, this is the third place. And on the second place, this is 55%, we see development of the all-national program, Open Government for local level. This is an important component. The all-national program, Open Government local level, can ensure the effective rebuilding infrastructure. We have approximately the same percentage for the areas transparency in rebuilding and restoration processes at the local level, and also approximately the same percent goes to development of local open government action plan. Today, we already have here the communities that have their action plans for open governance. This is Ternopil, Khmelnytsky, and Vinnytsia. But also we have a number of other communities that in autumn developed these local open government plans. And it's very important to disseminate this practice. We also have a number of proposals related to anti-corruption events and measures that should be included into the National Action Plan. Environment protection is also one of the areas. Also, we see the issue on combating unsuccessful gender stereotypes. And also we see a number of issues about engagement of IDPs. And also we had an open question where you were invited to write your own options. you agree with me, we shall generalize these proposals together with the Association of Ukrainian Cities, and we shall send an official letter to the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers about including these proposals mentioned in the survey and in the chat for the local self-governance level to be represented in the National Action Plan. Now I would like to give the floor to Marita Morris, and we go to the next thematic session.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Thank you all for this very, very informative and inspiring session that we have had. And I'm not in the closing yet, but I would like again to say my thanks to Jose Maria Marin, representing OGP. We together with the AUC will make new proposals for local authorities, basing our proposals on the enthusiasm that local authorities in Ukraine are showing towards the open government principles. And I think this is really extraordinary, and it needs to be commended once more. And this is also the reason why, seeing such a proactiveness in the country, that we would like to present to you today the features of deliberative democracy. The Congress has approved and adopted a report in March 2022 on deliberative democracy as a way to go beyond elections. And this report is based on a number of experiences, including one that we have had together with the city of Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has proven to be extremely successful in terms of the city addressing specific recommendations that the citizens, part of the Citizens' Assembly, have made, and the city being very committed to addressing these recommendations with a regular, with an action plan and regular overview of the implementation with indicators, very, very high professional way of dealing with the citizens' recommendations and very concrete results out of that. So that's another way of complementing citizen participation, and I would very much encourage you to listen to Yves de Jager, who represents the FIDE, federation that gathers experts on these topics. Yves, you will be showing, I think, a PowerPoint. We will translate this PowerPoint in Ukrainian, make it available to everyone, but the recording will also be available as well. And we trust that this is only the first step in this adventure of deliberative democracy, and that Ukraine, as they have shown for open government, their proactiveness will be also proactively engaging in innovative approaches to citizen participation. So thank you, Yves, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for having me today. Thank you, Marita. Thank you to all of you. It's humbling for somebody working for an organization that has the word democracy and Europe in its name, to be in presence of people who are actually experiencing the fight for democracy in Europe. Just as a small kind of side note, the room I'm in at the moment, which is our office room in the house, was the home of a family from Odessa for several months, who with 4 people lived in a small room as refugees from your country, but felt safe enough during the summer to go back, thanks to the valiant efforts of your defense forces. And we hope that the discussions today are the forward-looking to the victory that will ensue for your country. We're all hoping for that as quickly as possible. So thank you for having me and to giving me briefly the floor on this. I have a small PowerPoint to present what the work we do, including with the Council of Europe in the Balkan recently. But I will do this very briefly, and then if you have some questions, if this would be interesting to you, you let me know. Thank you. I hope I will share my screen. Let me know if this is visible. Marite, can you see this? So what we work on in our organization is how to look at methods and we help public authorities to involve citizens in a more qualitative way in policy making. And this is throughout Europe, as much in countries like Denmark and Finland with strong trust in government. There are still a lot of ways in which policymakers are looking for ways to involve citizens in a qualitative way in policy making. Now, of course, as you all know, and I've been here since the start of this meeting, I've heard a lot of interesting experiences. Of course, there are already a lot of non-electoral ways of participating. And I think, for example, since the Maidan revolution, and especially since 2015, Ukraine has had a strong experience very quickly in participatory budgeting. If I'm not wrong, over 150 cities and communities in Ukraine do participatory budgeting. And Kiev alone, I think in 2019, had more than 4% of the population voting in the participatory budget. So there are different ways already of involving citizens, but we are looking at ways and experiences to deepen this. And so and this is very brief, one of the issues also in a country like mine, but throughout Europe, we see with participation is that very often there is a problem in who participates if this is left completely to voluntary participation. For example, as the book cover on the left shows, a lot of research has shown that certain types of citizens are hardly present in free participation exercises. And also in many countries, for example, I heard one of the speakers talk about gender perspectives and gender biases. In many countries, for example, women are still very absent in some of these exercises. I think, on the other hand, I read a report of Kiev participatory budgeting where 60% were women who were participating in the meeting. So this can go in both ways. But very often, people with low scholarity, young people, are very hard to involve in participation efforts. Second, on the right, free participation, open participation sometimes attracts people who have very strong feelings about a certain topic, but might not specifically be a majority view or represent the wider community. They might be very loud, very insistent on their point, but that means that sometimes the public space is captured by people who have a very specific view on things or defend a certain interest, and that might be very valid, but might not be the wider public's perspective on the specific problem and issue. And then I think the second speaker today already mentioned, talking about youth, people want participation to have certain implications. And I think the speaker also said young people will want to participate if they see that actually something happens with what they do. And what we look at in our work very much is what is called the participation ladder, is some forms of participation are just listening to citizens without any promise that what is said will matter or will have any influence on policy. What we try to look at is how you can get to higher levels of the implication of citizen participation, where you really give citizens a form of empowerment. It doesn't mean that they decide instead of the representative elected officials, but they have a certain influence in their recommendations being taken into consideration. Now, as you know, certain groups already have that type of very qualitative input in policy, stakeholders, civil society actors, and they are very important, but they are just few in number. And some of these groups are not always felt as being representative of the wider population. In France, a few years ago, for example, you had an uprising of the so-called Yellow Vest movement, and research showed that some of these people, the lower scholarized part of the Yellow Vest movement, distrusted some of the stakeholder actors as much as they did some other policy actors, because they felt decisions were made in rooms where they had no access. So to be very brief, and this is just a brief introduction to this topic, is what is a deliberative process? What type of processes have we been doing, amongst others, with Marite's collaborators? Is in cities, we take random samples. What we mean by random is we organize some form of lottery, which means that citizens get an invitation from the mayor, the city council. Would you want to come and participate in a group that looks at a certain policy issue of your town? That group is given a clear task and mandate. So it's not a policy topic that is still open or clear. It must be not clear. It must be very clear what the topic is. In some cases, like in the process we did in Mostar with the Council of Europe, even that agenda, that task was decided by civil society and citizens themselves in collaboration with the city council. And these people are giving a clear mandate. So these citizens work on something, but they know how, in the end, their work will be taken into account. These citizens are a smaller group out of the population, but this allows you to give them enough time. Very often the problem with participation, where you have an open call, is this is one evening or 1 hour in the city hall. In this case, this group, for example, in Mostar, these were several weekends. Of course, these citizens were given some remuneration, some money for their time and work. They were helped if they needed some assistance to get to the meetings. But what we saw in Mostar is that almost everybody showed up for all the meetings. You give these citizens all the information available on that policy topic that they need to make an informed decision. They then deliberate amongst themselves, which is not discussed. They don't shout. They talk amongst each other, and then they look whether they can find recommendations that they as citizens can, all or most of them, can agree on. And what we see in over hundreds of examples that we've studied is that in most cases, citizens do find agreement on common positions on these types of policy questions. Now, I won't go into the technicality. How do you do this lottery? There is a lot of technicality, but there is actually a certain type of principle that has been established internationally and that even some international organizations have seen now as standards. So it is done in 2 steps. And the second step is to ensure, for example, that you have a gender balance, that enough young people are present in that final group, that, for example, educational level is taken into account. So you have a mixed group that represents much different perspectives of your population. So what are the advantages of using such as what we call stratified random selection, so such a group? It is inherently more egalitarian. What you have is, and again, I don't have the time for this, but if you would get some time to know that case in Mostar, for example, you have people showing up that would normally not be in the room in such type of policy processes. And so all citizens in the end have an equal chance to receive that letter, to be part of that group. And so there is an inherently more egalitarian feeling of participation. And that can increase the legitimacy of such a process, because the participants in the assembly are people who came out of duty less than activism. And so, which means that other citizens who are not in that group can see that the people in the room just came because they were called upon to help their city find some solutions for a policy problem, rather than they are activists for a certain cause and kind of showed up themselves to push a certain position. What we know from research is diverse groups with different types of citizens actually result in better outcomes. More perspectives actually lead to better policy outcomes. There is research, a lot of research on that, on what is called collective intelligence. And very often they will do better in policy outcomes than homogeneous expert groups. Sometimes even just because expert groups are very often consistent of male, highly educated, and will sometimes, if they look at how this then goes toward policy and communities, look from their perspective and their own living experiences, which might not be the ones of citizens at large. Then people are also more likely to trust a process where they see ordinary people reflecting as all parts of society and engaging in complex trade-offs. What do we mean is the citizens in those groups are not just asked to make a wish list. They are also told that there is a limited budget, that there are challenges. In Mostar, there are clear challenges, for example, in Bosnia, what is still a post-civil war context, even after 20 years. And so they really reflect on these complex trade-offs, and other citizens, when they see that citizens in that group come to a common position, even after having heard the different trade-offs, increases trust in such a process. So other benefits, more on the systemic level, because you have informed public judgment, because in that process you give all that information, it is less about what people see on a Twitter or a Telegram account or biased information. It is a decision based on informed public judgment rather than very quick public opinion based on a few things that were quickly seen. What we see in a lot of research is that citizens who took part in such a process actually have more trust afterwards in public actors. They also see the complexity of policymaking. So they become actually ambassadors for the democratic system and for public actors. Important, maybe also in a context of what you're working on with OGP, is because all that information has to be presented openly to these citizens and in a way that is also visible to other citizens, for example, through a website, through some live streaming, it means that there is complete transparency. Yes, there is no closed room in which stakeholders present information that others cannot see. There is a complete transparency, and that increases accountability and can even in some cases help reduce corruption. And finally, I've already said this, less grip on participation by polarized or fringe elements. Yes, the common citizen, what we see, is very often open to reflect and take positions that go outside of their own position or comfort zone. I cannot go into all of these examples, but this has been used and is used in many cities throughout Europe. The photo left top is the group in Mostar. The beautiful thing about this is that I took part as an expert in that process without being able to travel to Mostar due to COVID. So I've seen these citizens on video, I've talked to them, but I cannot tell you out of this group, for example, who belongs to the Serbian ethnic group. I cannot tell you who are the Croats in this group. So this is just a group of citizens, and they worked together for several weekends. Most of them not knowing each other, they've never met, and still at the end of this process, they felt like a common bond of being citizens that work together for their community. Other examples in this collage of photos are the city of Copenhagen, Ireland, who have done this several times on the national level. On the right, on the bottom, the Paris Citizen Assembly, which has a permanent citizen assembly, which we helped establish for the city of Paris. And then in the middle, on the bottom, it's the German-speaking community of Belgium that has its own parliament. It is a federal region, and they have also a permanent, already for several years, they have a permanent rotating group of citizens that is involved in policymaking. And all parties, after several years, have evaluated this, and all parties agreed to continue this and are happy with this process added to the work of their parliament. Now, I cannot go in all the ways that you have to make this work, but we can summarize how to design such a process in 3 words. It's you design it for legitimacy. In every step of designing such a process of a citizen jury, a citizen council, a citizen assembly, they have different names. We try to think when we help set up these processes, how we can achieve the maximum amount of legitimacy for what comes out of the work of this group. Of course, legitimacy for the other citizens who are not in that room. But we always, of course, also look at the means the public actor has. Some cities have more means, others have less. And we always try to see how we can increase legitimacy, but within the means of the public actor. This is my final slide. This process now, over the last 2 decades, has increased momentum in both Europe, the United States, but also in South America. You have the first processes being established. And so in the meantime, there are real quality criteria. It's not a time of improvisation anymore. The OECD, an international organization, has actually published a big report in which quality criteria have been set up. I was part of the expert group several years ago, setting up those quality criteria. The only thing that is still lacking is that there is still, at the moment, no control or enforcement mechanism, such as the OSCE monitoring of, for example, of elections. But also that is a next step that we think no doubt will at some point come. So this was a very, very brief introduction, and I thank you very much for your time. If you would have any questions, I already thank you for your attention. So I will give the floor back.
Thank you very much, Yves, for this insightful presentation.
Thank you.
We could maybe summarize such processes with other keywords like randomness. You insisted very much on that, and I think this is one of the most valuable aspects that deliberative democracy has, that it allows for people, anyone, to be involved in such a process, and not only those who are really always ready to have a say. And this is also probably very important in a context like Ukraine, where you have a number of vulnerable people, vulnerable groups, and I think that giving a voice in the forthcoming period to all the new residents in the local authorities is important, and they will have to find creative ways also to see how to organize this randomness, to include IDPs. Inclusiveness, I was just speaking of it, but you mentioned the gender aspect, the youth aspect. In Mostar, we have involved youth from the age of 16, and actually out of 48 members of the assembly, 3 were 16 years old. So that was also very interesting, and they had the same place, the same voice as older participants. The oldest, I think, was 80. So you see a wide range of the society. Also, another element that you mentioned, you touched upon regarding Mostar, was that we could not see who came from which ethnic group, and this in a city is such a polarized and divided city as Mostar. This was very interesting to witness, and to see now how this continues when the country is under in a very difficult political situation, and the city council was not affected by this political situation in the rest of the country. They have, on this deliberative process and the follow-up, always voted unanimously, and this is something really that is outstanding. So another aspect of this deliberative process is that it can bring together in a pluralistic manner local councillors and the population. And the last one is about openness, transparency that you have mentioned. And I think these are also very key features that are at the heart of the discussions we have had today on open government. I would like to give the floor to participants. I'm sure that there are questions, because to those who have not experienced deliberative democracy, you might wonder how this is bringing something really new, and how this is bringing results and deepening the relation between the residents and public authorities. I don't see very well on my screen. I don't know if someone can help me if there is a question there.
Якщо дозволите, до того, як учасники включаться в обговорення,
On your permission, before our participants probably will ask their questions, I would like, first of all, to say that in the chat you have the report of the Congress on advisory deliberative democracy Marite has been talking about, and we shall also provide the link to the OECD process related to deliberative democracy. But I think that inclination of the Ukrainians to implementing innovative approaches regarding engagement of citizens will definitely make the basis for implementing deliberative democracy in the Ukrainian cities. It seems to me we have a question from Ivano-Frankivsk. Unfortunately, we see that there are power outages in the regions and the number of participants has reduced. But if Ivano-Frankivsk, the regional department, is there, you're welcome. I know that you had the question. Well, while they're trying to connect, there was a question in the chat that was like that. Is the tool of deliberative democracy can be used in a big city, for example, in the capital, in Kyiv, whether it will be an effective tool to be used? And there is also another question, where we can get the lists of the citizens that will be included into this random lottery, so to say. Thank you.
Marite, I will. So on Kiev, this has been done at many sizes. This has been done in Paris, but this has been done on the country level, and even the European Union has done this last year with 200 citizens, 4 different times, with 200 citizens coming from the different countries. So, and we've done this in very small places, villages with 5,000 inhabitants. Of course, what I've shown on the slide is you adapt to the means a certain place has. So, of course, you need to kind of reassess. So the most important thing, I think, is as long as policymakers are the ones setting the topic, and is to choose something you actually want to do something with. If you call citizens, they will show up and they will do the work. We've seen this time and time again. But of course, if they deliver something and then you don't do, or you don't respond to it, you don't have to do everything they say, but at least you have to respond to it. If you don't do that, of course, you will create frustration. And so there is a certain, if you do this, you need to actually also engage yourself as a policymaker in this. But in that sense, size doesn't really matter. The lottery, of course, we have a whole paper on different ways of doing this. The lists, in some countries, they have lists of inhabitants. This country, actually, Belgium, has a very systematic way. Even if you come and live here, after 3 weeks, you're in the system, which means that the city of Brussels does these panels. Actually, everybody who is not even a Belgian citizen can be invited for them and gets an invitation by name. But in many countries, for example, they use lists of addresses. And I think especially in Ukraine, even for a long time after you will be back in a peace situation, you'll have internally displaced people. And so, for example, methods will more rely on addresses rather than maybe names. So everybody's open to be invited to this. And so what we try to, and Marite already said this, is we always say you should try to invite people, or everybody should be able to get an invitation who will be affected by the policy that these citizens look at. And so we always try to aim for, do not only look at, in diversity like Brussels or in this country, at people who have Belgian nationality. Look at inhabitants rather than we always try to say start of 16-year-old instead of 18. And so a beautiful thing last Friday, I was at the feedback moment in the European Parliament, and a Czech young man of 17 years old was addressing the Czech foreign minister who was there representing the European Council, and really in very good terms vocalizing the work he had been doing in his he was part of a citizen panel. And so you had a 17-year-old young man really expressing and asking accountability from somebody representing the European Council. So it is really empowering. And so taking in people who normally are not part of such groups is really key. And there are different ways of doing this. Work with address lists or other ways. I know there's a city in Belgium that does this with young people for participatory budgeting, and they ask schools to do a first selection, and then they draw out of the lists that the schools do, and they always have a majority of girls, which in youth participation is not always the case because there are more women than men statistically in most countries. In this country, it's 51 versus 49. So deliberative processes very often have a majority of women because you balance for gender. So you can do this in different ways with young people through schools, through addresses, through lists. But
yes, and because women are more numerous on this at a global level than men, so at least this is a fair representation, which is not the same when you look at the parliaments and when you look at the councils, the city councils in general, unless there are some legislation that imposes parity. It's not that evident that women come into participating into political life as easily as we would hope. I would add to what you were saying, Eve, is that another feature is that this citizens' assemblies are creating, I would call it, snowball effects, because you were mentioning this young man at the European Parliament, but we had the similar situation in Mostar. People get involved through the citizens' assembly, and they continue getting involved. There has been creation of new NGOs, community groups. There has been also, as the city was responding to the needs, more trust in the local community and local NGOs in proposing new projects, in proposing new ventures to work with the city. It's directly with the city. So there are these snowball effects that are, I think, very valuable. The subject can be done of discussion, can be of different kinds. You did not mention Ireland, who had this citizens' assembly regarding abortion, one of the most difficult discussion in the country. And following the results of the assembly and recommendations, they changed the law, and now abortion is possible and is accepted in Ireland. In France, there is now a movement on to show you how you can tackle difficult subjects. There's going to be an assembly on the right to death, the right to their own decision to die, and which is a very difficult subject. And let's see what citizens will say. So I've named two issues that are not the responsibility really of the cities, but still to show that deliberative democracy allows for citizens to discuss issues that in a learning now I can't find a word, allows citizens to discuss issues based on a long learning phase, that is necessary, and you can trust citizens that they have a understanding, and they can. The proposals do not only come always from certain educated people and educated groups in cities, and I think this is something also for us to take into account, to have a very humble view on who could have a say, and the value of the say of each and every one in such processes. But Svetlana, maybe, Yves, you wanted to add?
Yes.
Sure. Go.
Maybe
Maybe
an example that is more on a city level is Copenhagen is going to have a new island in front of in the harbor, but it's going to be as big as the current old city. So, and it's very contested. What should come on that island? How many living units? For who? Mobility. Some want the ringway to go through it, but some people say, no, we don't want new cars in that place. And so it's about the construction of a whole section of the city where politically there was actually a majority for a decision, but it was so contested. And many citizens were like, but no citizens were involved. This was an elite decision. And it was very, very contested. And so the city has now decided we will have a citizen group look at this. And actually, the lottery or the sortition is not a gimmick. It is more, who are then those citizens who will, co-decide on something that will affect more than 1 million Copenhageners? And so they turn towards, we will use a random selection where we look at all the groups or perspectives that we think are important to be represented, rather than some small groups. For example, there's a very small group in the city who is really against the island, but including death threats and so we're talking Copenhagen, Denmark, where death threats is police immediately found out who these were, and it wasn't serious. But so there's very small groups of people who have very strong feelings about this, who would normally be the front stage of the discussion. And the city has said, no, we want regular Copenhageners to see how we can do the construction of this part of the town. And so that is, for example, a very interesting process. I think if we're more looking at cities, it's about urban planning, mobility, these types of things. How should we do this? What values should guide us? These citizens don't design the houses. They don't become experts and architects, but they give sort of recommendations on what values and what priorities should be taken in what is going to be a multi-billion project for the city of Copenhagen that will for 50 years decide on that part of the town, where probably 50,000 housing units can be built. So that's a big construction. So it's not only about value, like abortion or end of life. It's also about mobility or big infrastructure works, or that this gives a citizen perspective on these things. And what we see in processes where citizens can also set the agenda is very often it goes very much down to, in the German-speaking community of Belgium, it is a group of citizens that decides the topics. And the topics are on healthcare workers, how they do their work, and who cares in hospitals, how are these people treated, education, living conditions. So it's very down to earth. Sometimes topics that politicians are sometimes a bit busy in very value and polarized topics. What we see, citizens want to really talk and work. In Mostar, it was about clean living environments, how the living environment of the city. That's what the citizens wanted to talk about, not the ethnic divisions of electoral districts. What for 15 years is already the political debate. I hope this adds a bit of perspective.
Yes, thank you, Yves. And you did name one, which is climate change, the big trend currently of cities that are gathering citizen assemblies to deal with climate change and big environmental issues. Svetlana, maybe our friends from Ivano-Frankivsk have joined, or have they written in the chat?
Я поки що не бачу запитань в чаті. Шановні учасники, якщо у вас
I
є
so far do not have any questions in the chat. Dear participants, if you have a question regarding this topic, you may raise your virtual hand or you may turn on your mic and voice your question for us to be able to communicate on the topic. But so far, I would like to state that we have just started discussing the approach of deliberative democracy. This is only the first brief discussion, and I hope that in the nearest future we are going to organize a more extensive webinar and will provide more detailed discussion to this approach. We'll see what elements of deliberative democracy and what examples of deliberative democracy we already have in Ukraine. And this topic will be definitely more extensive. We see that in the chat, Mr. Dejager left his contact information, his email address, and you can email your questions to him. So once again, I would like to say that we have just started discussing this topic today. Unfortunately, I do not see our colleagues from Ivano-Frankivsk. Probably they have the connection issues. If the colleagues do not have any other questions, I think we can conclude our meetings.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Thank you, Eve. As Svetlana was saying, this is only the start, and I'm sure that with all the challenging times that Ukraine is living through and will still challenges that they will still have to address in the recovery, that we will have some good examples of deliberative democracy in Ukraine. We will organize further meetings on that in 2023. Thank you again, Eve. Well, I would like now then maybe to conclude this meeting of the platform. And first of all, I would like to thank the Cabinet of Ministers, Secretary of State Yarema for his presence, thank local authorities, all representatives, whether working as elected representative, whether working in the administration, or whether being part of the so-called civil society, youth councils, and so on, that were present today and actively present. I think that this meeting was the occasion to hear numerous examples of good practices, what works well, what needs to be improved. And this is something that will be taken further by the Association of Ukrainian Cities in the discussion with a central level on the new action plan on open government. Maybe some highlights about my takeaways, issues that will be important to be integrated in the action plan, youth participation, which requires an improvement of the policy framework, both at national and local level. That's something I heard. Networking between municipalities and peer exchanges on the youth engagement as well. There was an idea of developing a communication strategy jointly between the national authorities and the local authorities to agree on the best methods to share information and include citizens, in particular in the current context, energy cuts, availability of social and humanitarian services. I think this is very topical now as well. We can see that Ukraine, and we know not only with the three members of the local of the OGP local program, that there are many open government practices in Ukraine that we can learn from. So we, as Congress, we have our motto in our cooperation is to use peer exchanges, to have these people-to-people discussion, mayors speaking to mayors, local councils speaking to local councils from different parts of Europe. But also this is important to be done within Ukraine. I think this is a key way forward, that Ukrainians learn from their peers what are the innovative approaches, what are the successes that they have, successes and maybe failures also that have met. Dissemination of the practice of establishing a platform, local hubs. I think this was also in the very beginning of the discussion this morning, these local hubs for further exchanges between citizens, with citizens, and further networking as well with other European cities. That is one element that I find also very interesting, and that we could be working with the AUC to start implementing. But altogether, what I want to say is that we are very proud of having accompanied this mechanism of co-creation and dialogue and between the national and local level in Ukraine. The trust that is put in this is impressive, both from the central level and from the local levels. And I think this is also an interesting example for further discussions on other issues where the national authorities have committed to strategies and to action plans, and where local authorities can contribute to enhancing their commitments and enhancing the implementation of these commitments. We heard that it would be important also to collect evidence about co-creation, and we all know that data collection, evidence-based policies are always important and give more strength to what is being implemented. So this is something also that, together with the AUC, we could deepen. And anyway, and in conclusion, what I can say is that we can see Ukrainian communities demonstrating a high readiness to adhere to open government principles, to get really involved in what some call co-creation. What I like to call also is local alliances. I like the fact that both sides ally together to achieve something that is meaningful for the population. Last but not least, as Director Rafael Benitez announced in the beginning of the meeting, the Council of Europe is approving on the 14th the action plan for Ukraine. That was an action plan that was really discussed in depth with many stakeholders in Ukraine, including the Association of Local and Regional Authorities. This action plan is a 4-year action plan, but we will start first with, in light of the situation, with a 24 months project. And we are working jointly with the AUC to finalize the proposal and in order to, in the beginning of the year, start working within this new project. We will work along 3 lines of action. I would call them like that. The first one is, of course, strengthening the dialogue and coordination in terms of the future reconstruction efforts, reconstruction, rebuilding, recovery. All this doesn't start when the war is over. It has to start before, and a lot of communication and dialogue needs to happen so that it becomes effective when the time is when it is a time to start implementing. We would like to see local authorities and the association be fully fledged partners in these efforts of reconstruction. This includes, of course, legislative assistance, as we have done in the past, for the AUC to be able to advocate for local authorities and on all legislation that concern local authorities. And we will, in this case, very much look into the way the transition from the military to civil administration in the post-war period will take place, and how local democracy and democratic values are preserved in this context. This means supporting a local self-government reform with further decentralization efforts. It's not anymore a secret that the more a country is decentralized, the more resilient it is. And Ukraine has been, unfortunately, showing this. I'm saying unfortunately because it is in this context of brutal war, but it is an important lessons learned, and I think that everyone will grow from that, and not only Ukraine but other local authorities in other countries. The second line of action is, of course, enhancing the quality of representative and deliberative democracy, collaborative governance. We just spoke extensively of this and of citizen engagement. And I will not go now into depths, but we will continue supporting the work of this platform and the work of the AUC in localizing open government principles. And the last but not least, it concerns the promotion and upholding the right to equality and non-discrimination, having this human rights approach to local policymaking. And for that, we will engage in supporting directly local authorities that work with underrepresented groups, and we will be able to have some exchange of experience in this context. So this human rights-based approach is important also in light of youth participation, and I think that the AUC intends to set up a working group within its organization to deepen the work on ways youth is engaged and youth contributes to the policy making. Yeah, that's a lot of good plans, I would say, that we have, that we are very happy to prepare jointly with the AUC and jointly with some of the local authorities that have been accompanying these processes. We very much look forward to working with you. We very much look forward to giving as much support as we can. And we have, as a Congress, be very much on the side of Ukraine since the outset of this brutal war. We hope that in the difficult context, you will still find the strength to think of ways of improving local democracy and local governance. And I would like to very warmly thank you from Strasbourg for your commitment, for being with us, and for working together with us. And my big thanks go to the AUC, who has proven to be so supportive to their members, and who has proven to be one of the best partners in terms of openness, in terms of also joint co-creation of what is towards something that we all believe is important, is upholding democratic values in the country, working for democratic stability. So thank you all. Thank you to the team. Thank you for interpreters to having helped us in making understood. And thank you for the service provider who organized the technicalities for this meeting. I wish you all, as we say in French, bon appétit, and looking forward to our next exchanges. Thank you very much.